Good afternoon and welcome to Wednesday webinar. Today's topic, we are talking about lameness recording, reporting and analysis. We are joined today by Nick Bell and Gualter Graca, so thank you very much. What I will do is hand over to Nick, who can introduce himself and start his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sam. I'll just bring the slides up. Yeah, and thank you, Sam and the VetIMPRESS team and Gualter for the invitation to speak on this subject. So hopefully you can see my slides in a moment. It probably just takes a second to come up. Can you see that now?
Yeah, we can see them. Great.
Yes. Well, thank you again for the invitation. I'm really thrilled to be talking on this subject for a couple of reasons. I'm a data-orientated person. I love data, and I bring it into all aspects of my work whenever I can. And I love the statistical analysis, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of that, which is why I've ended up in a career that sort of bridges consultancy and research and hopefully combines the two to good effect. I'm also thrilled to be talking on this subject because I think we've seen quite a change in recent years. In the past, it's been very difficult to get hold of good quality data in relation to lameness and foot health. And we've seen quite a change in the last 10-15 years, which has led to the development of mobility scoring and handling of that data, and also better quality lesion scoring, and a means of integrating data from different sources, which I think is what's particularly exciting at the moment. And we're in a great period of change. And the analogy I would make is that we are coming out of the Dark Ages, and the Dark Ages are fascinating. It's that period of our history in between the Romans and the Renaissance, in which there seemed to be a deterioration in a lot of the information that was being gathered. And I really feel that we're coming out of that period in terms of lameness recording. And I mentioned mobility scoring because I think that has probably started the raising of awareness to how data can help manage a foot health problem. So here's some data from a case study that I published with David Main while we were, just after the Healthy Feet project finished at Bristol University. And we wanted to show how you could use regular mobility scoring, not just to inform people about farm team members, what was going on the farm, but also drive trim lists. And so here we've got a plot of the score 2 and 3 percentages for this herd over time, and at the bottom the pink line, which is the score 3 percentage, and it reveals quite an interesting story. But it sort of comes back to the data helped us on a number of levels. It helped us with our trim lists, it helped us identify risk factors, but it also helped motivate the team so that they could see that things that were happening on the farm had a direct relationship, positive or negative, to the foot health of the cow. So it was a useful, sensitive KPI. So what I want to talk about in the next 30 minutes or so is how we can handle some of this data, particularly mobility data. And I consider the mobility data is king. It's a high-level strategic KPI, and one that most farmers can relate to. If a cow can't walk, she can't eat, she can't be taken to the milking parlour, she can't show estrus. So it's a fundamentally important aspect to cow health and welfare. But I also want to talk a little bit about lesions causing lameness, and I want to emphasize that this is what gives you your diagnosis, and why lameness incidence is probably not that helpful, or equally the recording of incidental lesions that may not be causing any sort of lameness or pain in the cow when you pick up the foot. So I really want to focus on the importance of the lesion causing lameness as the thing that we want to capture and report effectively. I also want to mention how we can use data from routine foot checks and how we need to handle this data separately so that we don't cloud what's going on, because a lot of this data actually constitutes incidental data. But then if we find a lesion causing lameness at routine foot check, then we need to understand what's gone wrong. I'll mention a little bit about some of the additional data that might be useful in coming up with a diagnosis or understanding foot health issues on a dairy farm. And so I'll touch on digital dermatitis scoring and mention briefly toe length scoring. And then I'll finish up by talking about where I think the future's heading with automatic lameness detection, ALD, and other things that we could be looking at in terms of lesion KPIs and management KPIs, prognostic indicators, and some economic comparisons that we could be doing. So if we start with mobility data, as I said right at the start, we've gone through a bit of a revolution that started with the gathering of mobility data, and I think it's been a really good starting point, because if we're screening cows and herds effectively, then it's our means of establishing what is a lame cow and which is a sound cow, and then we can then start to build a decent data set using the lesions causing lameness from properly identified lame cows. And I mentioned this case study, and I just want to go through it in a little bit more detail. So in this case study, which we started with this farm in March 2007, and we did a mobility score, and they came out with 70% score 2s and 3s, which was a source of great upset for the farmer at the time. And he was a good friend. He is a good friend of mine. We're still friends on Facebook. And but at the time it was a real shock to him, and he really felt it was a bad assessment. He didn't really feel that was the cows he should be focused on. He was focused on the score 3s, which was the pink line at the bottom. But he agreed that he would do a little bit more foot bathing. He ran the herd through an antibiotic foot bath. We saw an improvement, but I came back a month later and things were looking like they were deteriorating again. So we then had a discussion about the cows that were on the score 2 and 3 list, and I asked him which of the score 2s he'd trimmed and what he'd found, and he said, well, he hadn't had a chance to deal with those. He was focused on the score 3. So that then opened up a conversation about how we approach our foot trimming, and he agreed to get 30 cows through the crush, and we trimmed those together. He understood that I was passionate about feet and wanted to help him, and I could see he was keen on feet, and we rebonded, and things improved dramatically. We had a good summer. Then we had a little bit of a spike as cows came in the autumn, and there were a few things that we discovered along the way that were really useful predictors of risk factors in the farm. And the farm team then started to get quite used to the idea that there would be a score the next week or the next fortnight, and they were quite keen to see what was going to happen as a consequence. So through the course of this exercise, this farm went from 70% score 2s and 3s down to just over 15% score 2s and 3s, but also notice the score 3s were very effectively managed. And so what we concluded was we could use the mobility score to predict events or risk factors on the farm. We could show the response to changes that were being implemented on the farm, such as better treatment and trimming protocols and improvements to cow comfort. But probably the main thing was it was highly motivating. And I think that was probably one of the main conclusions that I came up with. But it also gave us some data that we could then analyze in a more detailed way. And we sort of floated the idea that we could maybe generate lists of new lame cows and recovered and chronic lame cows. And it formed a basis for generating our trim lists, a disciplined screening protocol, as we might want to call it. And I've had a lot of queries from farmers about what should they use in order to generate their checklist, because they can quickly become overwhelmed and over-present cows. And I think there's a real skill to generating what we sometimes refer to as trim lists, but we should really, strictly speaking, refer to them as checklists. So these cows are being presented for foot checks. And of course, on the list should be the new lame cases and the cows that might be deteriorating, going from the score 2 to the score 3, so worsening in their severity of lameness. Perhaps also the chronic lame cows that didn't respond to an earlier treatment. And I would suggest that actually we should probably give cows 5 weeks unless they're deteriorating. Then there'll be a group of cows, the score 3 cows, which if they've been score 3 for more than 5 weeks, probably should be presented to the vet. And then there might be another list of cows that, for whatever reason, might warrant an extra check because the block, they might not be walking well on a block, they might be losing body condition score, dropping milk yield, or due a bandage removal, or due a general recheck. So it takes some time and some skill in order to pull together this list. Also, it's worth bearing in mind there are going to be some cows that you want to exclude. So cows that have been recently checked within 5 weeks, I would suggest. Cows that need more time. And so that there might be a note next to their last trim event saying, actually, this cow's got a thin sole. She needs a bit more time. Or a cow that's been recently calved and maybe just got a bit of post-calving tenderness, or some things that you just cannot treat. So some of I mentioned already thin soles, but there might be some sort of joint injury or some sort of bony change that means that that cow will physically never walk normally and won't benefit from repeated treatments in the crush, as far as we can tell. So there's no simple way of generating these lists. They will take time and discipline, and that's a big turn-off for farmers. They're time-poor people. And so anything that we can do to help simplify the classification of cows will obviously help our clients and will help trimmers and ourselves as well as veterinary surgeons. I think we might have some trimmers on the line as well. So some of you may be familiar with Total Vet. I think this is a really neat and simple, clever way of summarizing the categories that we might be interested in. So the screen here is divided into the cows that were lame or not lame on this score. So that's the vertical line. Anything on the left, they're sound on the latest score. Anything on the right would be lame, score 2 or 3 on this score. And then the horizontal line looks at the previous score, which is likely to be last month's score. And anything below the line would be a score 0 or 1. Anything above the line would be lame, score 2 or 3, which means we've got in the bottom left, these are the cows that we would consider as sound, and they've stayed sound. The cows on the right, which were sound and now have become lame, these are the new lame. And then the cows in the top right would be the cows that were lame and are still lame. So these are the chronic cows. And then the cows in the top left are the cows that were lame but are now sound. So these are the apparent cures or the recovered cows. And this page gets populated with cow numbers, and it's quite a quick and simple way of generating a means of filtering your list. A more visual way of doing it, which I quite like, is entering the data either through Mobility Monitor on Herd Companion or entering it directly into Herd Plus, and then plotting it on the fertility chart. And if I maybe, I'm not sure if you can see this on the right hand side, there's some, I'll just move us down to the bottom there. On the right hand side, there's some checklists where you can tick the mobility score. So you can tick to show mobility score, you can tick to show lameness, and you can tick to show trim events. Now in this data set, trim events weren't being recorded on InterHerd Plus, but the mobility scores came through through Mobility Monitor and Herd Companion, and the lame events were coming through. So we can then take a look at are the score 2 cows being treated quickly enough, and there's no lame event recorded here for some reason, so it might be worth looking into why that might be, and that might be for genuine reasons. She might be a cow that had a hip problem. This cow, she's had a a lameness treatment event, but it looks like it's some days or weeks after she was identified as lame on mobility score. And of course, we can see their quarterly mobility scores, which is probably not frequent enough for lameness detection. So this gives us some means of discussion. And of course, for this farm, it probably wasn't the only way. I know it's not the only way that this farm was detecting lame cows and recording lame cows, but this is, for me, quite a good way of going forward. Now, this is a farm that is religiously scoring cows on a weekly basis, but recording cows on uniform on a monthly basis, and entering those scores onto uniform to generate their trim lists. But they then go through this by hand, and they will look. So here in this column here, I've downloaded this and put it into a spreadsheet. But this particular farm would then go through this last column and say, right, okay, this cow here, she's score 2, and she's had a history of being score 0 or 1, so she would constitute a non-lame cow that has just gone lame. I've programmed my spreadsheet so that it identifies her as a newly lame cow, so I can spot those quickly. And I look through her history, and I can see from this set of analyses here that she's been a recently lame cow. She's not had lots of repeat cases. This cow here was previously lame but appears to have recovered, so she constitutes a cure. And so it's a little bit laborious doing this with spreadsheets. A lot of farmers would just scroll down this, click into the cow that they're looking at, look at the history and relate that back to lesions found at foot trimming. And that takes time, particularly for this herd, which is 1,000 cows. And doing that all the time, it can quickly tire a manager of this task. So anything we can do to try and simplify this will be good. But this data is really exciting for me because we can then start to quantify a few things. So in this case, we had 68 cases that appeared to be new lame cases. Now this category included a few cows that are fluctuating, so they might appear apparent new cases, but it will include some repeat cases, because my simple spreadsheet analysis couldn't take into account very easily the cows that were lame 3 months ago, then went sound, and were sound for a couple of months, and then went lame again this month. But this is fairly close to a genuine new case, a number of new cases. We know we've got 30 cows that appear to be chronic based on 2 successive scores, which actually doesn't really satisfy my true definition of chronic, which I would say should be 5 weeks, but it's close enough. We've got 45 cows that are recovered, but unfortunately that recovered number is a little bit less than a new number. So actually what we've got is an R number overall of 1.5. So while the graph on the right hand side shows we're seeing a good steady improvement over time, we're actually probably just seeing a slight deterioration compared to last month, which may have been a good month for whatever reason, and that's reflected in this R number. We can also see that there might be just a couple of extra cows that have deteriorated over the cows that have improved. So we just need to keep half an eye on that as well. So these are the sorts of numbers that I like to look at if we can. But probably the most exciting thing for me is to separate out the parity 1 cows, because that really does tell you about what is happening here and now and in our recent history. Because unfortunately, particularly the herds that have older cows and a very good longevity, there may be a legacy effect of things that went wrong 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I always say foot health improvement is a 4-year process. But if we can look at parity 1 cows, then we can actually see exactly what's going on right now. Now, in this instance, I've plotted the parity 1 cows in 2 weeks. Well, I say we. This was Sophie Mahendran's master's work at the RVC that she did with me. And she's plotted the heifer prevalence in 2-week blocks, and it shows actually we're seeing a bit of tenderness in the heifers in the first 42 days after calving, which is quite a normal phenomenon, and then things settle down, and then we seem to have maybe a second rise, sort of around about 120 to 140 days in milk, and that might possibly be a post-trimming lameness phenomenon, but there might be a whole host of factors that could be contributing to that. And then as those heifers progress down, we're down at 1 or 2% at around dry-off. So that's that tells us a really positive message for this farm, that we probably have to be very careful with our freshly calved heifers. So if we want to sum up how we can use the mobility data to greatest effect, I think that there's a simple approach, which is just to plot the score 2s and the score 3s. And this is a high-level strategic KPI, which I think is very motivating and can drive an awful lot of change in its own right. And if we use the mobility scores on a frequent basis, and I would say every 1 to 2 weeks, to really make it work best, and then maybe a really good formalized score once a month. But if we use our foot check data to drive our trim lists or our foot check lists, that takes some skill and some expert managing, and ideally would involve cross-checking with previous mobility scores and previous treatments in the foot crush. And then lastly, I think filtering out the older cows so that we are looking at parity 1 animals really does enhance the power of this analysis, because we are then really looking at how things are working right now. And I've done a talk recently. It's on the importance of heifers. Lameness is the disease of heifers that manifests in older cows, and that's something I know Roger Blowy talks a lot about as well. So moving on to lesions, if we've got a proactive means of screening herds for lameness, then we have a little bit more confidence that the lesions we're finding at lameness treatments reflect the genuine level of lesions in the herd. Without that proactive screening, then a lot of lesions causing lameness gets missed, and the lameness levels can look artificially good. And one of the things I like to do to improve the quality assurance of lesion detection is to use the hoof maps. So we've got here on the left-hand side the international hoof map that was first published by Paul Greeno and Josh Vermont back in the 90s. And we really haven't changed this much, apart from adding some extra zones to reflect some of the other areas that we will be recording lesions causing lameness. But for the claw lesions, this works very well. So a sole ulcer, for instance, can only really happen in zone 4 and within this sort of region of zone 4 as well. So by recording ulcerated lesions in this zone, we can be a bit more confident that it is a genuine sole ulcer, and not to be confused with perhaps a heel ulcer, which I'll mention in a moment. And similarly, white lines, the classic white line will happen in zone 3, but could happen in zone 2 or zone 1, but they're probably slightly different causes in zone 2 and zone 1. That might be more related to thin soles, high wear scenarios. But you know, that could open up that discussion. And then I mentioned heel ulcers. I think it's worth differentiating heel ulcers from sole ulcers, and they tend to happen in zone 6, or that borderline between zone 4 and 6, but will run deep back into the zone 6, deep into that heel. And I would encourage the use of the international, the ICAR terminology, the international, I've forgotten what ICAR stands for. International, will come back to me in a moment, for animal recording. International Committee for Animal Recording, that's right. I've slightly modified this. So ICAR like to refer to sole hemorrhage at number 5. I like to differentiate that a little bit. I like to go a step further and confirm that actually there is some deep pain underneath the sole, which I would class as sole bruising. But this is all part of the quality assurance of recording, and then we can then generate some meaningful data. So I mentioned the hoof maps have expanded to include a number of different areas of the foot. So we've got 7, 8, 9 here on the top right, including the areas of the wall and coronary band, and then we've got some axial wall at 11 and 12. 10 is the area where we get digital dermatitis. So if we've then got good quality lesion data, I think we can then make a really good stab at plotting some lesion trends. And as I mentioned before, if you can filter for first cases and first parity, then you really do enhance the power of your analysis. And then you can really start to do some powerful assessments of seasonality and trends. Here's a plot here. I like to use these stacked graphs. They can get a little bit complicated if there are too many lesions, and ignore the lesions there in the bottom left. Some of those don't fit with the ICAR terminology, but I plotted this lesion data in order to get a feel for what was going on. And there was a change in June 2019 that ended up with some better quality recording, which seemed to increase the level of lesions, which was an artificial increase, just reflecting the better screening recording that was going on. And then there seemed to be an improvement, which I think is probably a genuine improvement from the better quality recording. And then one of the things I like to calculate from that better quality recorded lesion data is the percentage of cows affected by each lesion. I feel this is probably a more appropriate way of recording lesions causing lameness, because the recovery rate, the genuine recovery rate from lesions, is probably quite low. Once a cow's had a sole ulcer, she may appear to rekeratinize over that sole ulcer site, but the damage underneath that sole ulcer site to the digital cushion is permanent and irreversible, unfortunately. So she's prone to getting them again and again, and whether they are new cases or repeat cases, I tend to just gloss over that and say, well, look, how many cows have had sole ulcers, because that's the issue. And in this case, quite a large percentage of cows had had white lines and sole ulcers, which needed addressing, but not many with digital dermatitis, which was a really good news story for them. So the take-home points when it comes to doing your analysis of lesions causing lameness, that data quality needs very careful management in terms of getting that quality control right. And foot maps for me is one of the key ways of doing it, and combining the lesion data with a proactive screening approach using mobility scoring or something similar. And then ideally look at first cases. But if you can, by excluding the repeats, you can have an artificially high incidence rate of toe necrosis, because those cows get presented month after month after month, and they are probably only one case, strictly speaking, in terms of what the priority should be. So the other thing to suggest is to look at first lactation data. If we're seeing sole ulcers in first lactation, then we know we've got some work to do. And sole ulcers, white lines, and digital dermatitis, particularly the M2, the 2 centimeter ulcerated lesions, I feel are system failures. That's jargon. I feel that we can do an awful lot to prevent a large number of those. Once we're over 5% of cows with sole ulcers or white lines or digital dermatitis, then as lesions, separate lesions, then I think there's some room for improvement. So now, in the last few minutes, I just want to quickly finish up by talking about routine trims and some other data that we could gather, and then finish up by talking about the future of lameness detection. So I mentioned right at the start that we want to analyze the routine trim data differently, because we can very quickly alter our lesion prevalence by throwing in incidental lesions found at routine trims. Of course, if there is a sole ulcer, then we need to record that. And if we're finding sole ulcers at routine trims, then we want to ask the question why. Routine trims should really be about prevention and about picking up cows before they've had lesions progress to the point of sole ulcers. Sole ulcers generally take 2 months to develop. So if we're picking them up at routine trims, we've missed them with our routine screening. So one of the things I like to do when analyzing routine check data is just to make sure, are we doing enough? And is there enough capacity in the form of trimmers and trim events to meet all the routine check expectations that we should be doing? So here I've got some data from a 450 cow herd. worked out that there were 112 cows that would be going barren on an average year. We would take those off the pre-dry foot checks, but we might not, because we might think, well, actually some of those are going to have some extended lactations. They might not go straight away, so they might want some extra trimming, so we might want to alter that a little bit. So then we've got some pre-dry trims. We've got some early lactation checks that we want to apply to all cows, maybe at 10 weeks. Then we've perhaps got a lameness prevalence of 20% and a recheck rate of 40%. And so if we factor all of these things in, then actually we've got some routine trims and we've got some lame cow trims, which would give us a total of 1,300 cows just over that need checking in the foot crush in a given year, which would work out for this herd about 42 foot checks a week. And actually what they were achieving was 660, which clearly indicated they needed to double their capacity in order to meet the number of routine foot checks that would be ideal for them. Now, of course, that number might have been right, because they might have been doing the early lactation checks might have been on a selected number, and maybe some of them had been seen before that 10-week foot check. So there's a number of things you want to take into account with the discussion, but plotting their routine foot checks on a histogram revealed it. They were being very disciplined. Those routine foot checks were happening around about 70 days in milk, which was, in my mind, pretty impressive that they were that tight and consistent. You could then go on and look at the lesions at routine foot check, and this is some data that includes some other foot check data, not just the routine foot checks that were happening at 100 days and at 280 days, but some other foot checks that were happening in between. And we could see actually most of the sole ulcers were being picked up at the first foot check, and actually we probably needed to move that foot check forward in order to catch these sole ulcers at an earlier stage, ideally. So the take-home points is, when we're looking at routine foot check data, it's good to look at the trim capacity or the foot check capacity, make sure that we're hitting our desired. And for a lot of herds, housed herds, high-yielding herds, that probably needs to be 3 to 4 foot checks per year to account for the lame cows and the extra routine checks for the problem cows. And we want to verify that all those cows are getting checks at the designated time. So verifying the protocols are working and being met, and that can open up some really useful discussions. And then we want to look at the lesions that we're finding at those foot checks, but analyze them separately from the lame cow foot checks. It's important to differentiate the two. Now, I mentioned that there might be some other data that we want to be collecting, and I like to collect a few things. I like looking at hocks. I like looking at toe length. Probably the key one I want to mention now is the digiderm screening. So along the top here, we've got some digiderm images that, oh, let's go back. So just move this down here. So here we've got the M scores, and I quite like asking farm managers to have a go at scoring cows according to the M score. There's some really good guidance now published by ICAR. And if we plot these over time, you get a real feel for what's going on. So here we've got the blue M4s, the M2s. There's a problem here. We've got some M1s becoming M2s, but we've got things under control on this farm. We've got some M4s. So yeah, perhaps too many M4s at this point here. And what we can do is summarize these as non-regressing lesions, which is what we've got here on the right-hand side. So we can see over time, we've got the non-regressing lesions. We went through a period of problem there, another little bit of a problem there, but overall, 5% or 6% of cows with non-regressing lesions is looking really good. So I find this is a really useful additional bit of data that we can gather that will very quickly give us a feel for what's going on with digital dermatitis, which is actually quite a specific problem for a lot of farms in the UK still. So let's move this over here. So what's the future? And this is where I think we've got some exciting things in the pipeline. One of which I think, is the automated lameness detection. And I've done some work with one particular company, Ice Robotics, that produce cow alerts, and their automated lameness detection system looks really exciting. And it's important to say that no system is perfect. Mobility scoring is far from perfect. And I think in the work that I did with Ice Robotics, we're able to show that actually overall accuracy for the mobility scoring at first instance looked to be around about 75, perhaps up to 80%, but it wasn't perfect. And overall accuracy of their pedometer system with the algorithm looked fairly similar. But the beauty of the automated lameness detection system is that they are gathering data continuously all the time. And of course that presents a real challenge, because that generates an awful lot of data, which can potentially generate an awful lot of work. And so integrating some of this data with the management systems is going to be a really important step for Ice Robotics and the farmer. And working on ways to better predict lesions, either using the cow alert algorithms or additional data, I think is going to be a really exciting area of work going forward, because I think we can probably enhance what is already a pretty good prediction. But we can also start looking at recovery rates and understanding these, because I think there are a lot of factors influencing recovery rate on farm that we just do not have a good handle on at the moment. And then the thing that's going to be most powerful for motivating some of our more business-minded farmers is understanding the economics of this. What impact is that having on milk production, fertility, and culling? And it's through the integration of all this data that we'll be able to do some of these more sophisticated economic analyses. So just to finish up my bits, I think, as I said right at the start, mobility data for me is king. It's a simple, high-level strategic KPI which drives a lot of learning and can generate some really fascinating extra KPIs. So the new lame, the chronics, the recovered cows are really fascinating to look at once we've got some good quality data coming in regularly. It also enables us to proactively screen to generate better quality lesion-causing lameness, particularly if we can enhance the quality of that data capture at the crush side. So that is what gives us our diagnosis, particularly, again, if we're looking at parity 1 animals, which tells us what's happening here and now. So the routine foot check data, I think we can analyze separately, and we just have to be a little bit cautious about making sure that data is kept separate and that we respond to that accordingly, and that we're ensuring we've got enough capacity in order to make sure all the lame cows are being treated within 24 to 48 hours. That's my goal, and we can perhaps set that as a KPI. How quickly are we getting cows from the mobility score into the foot crush? And we can add some supplementary data in the form of digital dermatitis screening or toe length scoring or hock scoring in order to understand some of the additional dynamics and risks going on the farm. And I think that the future looks really exciting. We have well and truly come out of the dark ages, I think, but let's not kid ourselves. We are still in the dark ages on some farms, but yeah, with the technology coming along, I think this will make it much more accessible to a lot more farmers that maybe just need a simple approach and a lot of hand holding from us as advisors and yeah, people more familiar with using data. So with that, I just want to say a quick thank you for the invitation to speak on this subject, to some of the collaborators. So Cow Alert, AHDB, the AHDB Research Partnership, the Dartington Cattle Breeders Trust, and a whole load of clients and colleagues. And I'm just going to move this box one more time, because at the quote, I put a little quote here because I saw this picture last autumn and I thought it was wonderful. And I thought this captures something I think we get with data analysis, the breakthrough sometimes comes with finding a perspective not yet discovered by others. And that's where I think that the data analysis can be really exciting. You see there's a light bulb moment as people see what you probably sense sometimes when you go onto a farm, but you need something quantifiable to really prove it. Okay, so with that, I just want to say thank you and hand over to Gualter. So I need to stop sharing. There we go.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Nick. That was impressive. I'm just trying to get my slides up. So you can see that. Hi guys, my name is Gualter. Most of you hopefully will know me from the previous webinar Wednesdays. So I'm following Nick really to maybe give you a little bit of an insight on some of the things that Nick said and how can VetIMPRESS actually help. So my agenda is I'm going to touch a little bit about lameness is important. Obviously, Nick already covered that issue, no problem. But I'm just going to refrain just as an introduction to my presentation. Then we're really going to jump into this lameness of VetIMPRESS capability. I think of it as a 360 solution because we start with data recording. We have a very good solution for data recording above on the mobility scoring, on the level of lameness recording, and we go to certain levels of digital dermatitis, but we'll go through that. And not only that, we always make an effort to report that data back to the vets, and in a way that it can give extra information. And today, we're really going to get into a new situation where we're trying to develop a report center, but also I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how can we help on some of the issues that Nick said is very difficult to do and to ask the farmers to do on their busy lives. Lame cows, okay? Why study them? Well, simple. Lame cow is in pain, so she will reduce production, either because she's not eating properly, she's not spending enough time lying down, and it massively will impact welfare. And this is a very critical thing for me. I would like to think that every vet out there has the welfare of the cows in priority, and this is the responsibility. Our responsibility is to guarantee good welfare. And more nowadays, we are getting thrown into a situation where our farmers, our clients are being exposed to the vision of how they produce, not only what they produce and how much they produce, but how they produce it. And the welfare is becoming a very important issue. And then obviously it's an opportunity for the vet to get in and increase production, increased value for the farmer, and reduce lameness. So again, who lies the responsibility of the lameness? Well, it doesn't lie with anyone. It relies on a strong team. And we all know that the team is mainly composed by foot trimmers and vet techs, farmer, essentially, and a vet plays a very important role. And obviously, we're a little bit biased, but we believe that VetIMPRESS can really bring the communication and the togetherness of working about as a team, because we believe that our solution will allow that. So what is VetIMPRESS? VetIMPRESS is a hub system, a data hub system that is available on web and mobile, on tablets and phones, and it allows certain types of users to use the same system and communicate. So what is the solution? So as I said before, data entry, we have mobility scoring, foot trimming, there's the digital dermatitis scoring that is missing there, and then we're going to jump into the reporting area. Data entry. We'll start with mobility scoring. So our solution is a very simple solution. It's available on the iPad. It's available to use on a farmer level, vet tech level, and the vet level. And it allows for recording to happen on the parlor. So whenever you have a group of animals that you know which order they're going to come through from the parlor, you can pre-select the animals, and then all you have to do is press the mobility score. So it does make a little bit of a simple thing. And also it allows for the walk by, the one-to-one situation that is sometimes more common. Also, interestingly, the vet can choose not to record the most common value. So he's recording on a farm and he doesn't want to record all the ones because the ones are the most common or the zeros are the most common on that farm. He can choose not to record, and then he comes into the bulk scoring mobility, select all the cows that weren't scored and enter that data. So it's quite an intuitive and quite interesting system. We then go into the foot trimming data, and the foot trimming data screen works a little bit basically the same way, but we have the foot map as a start. So whenever anyone is lifting the feet, encountering where the problem is, it requires a little bit of skills, but then registering that place, as Nick said, can have a very big impact on where is the origin of the problem. So we in VetIMPRESS, we think that it's very important to show this map and to start with a map to localize the lesion. And then once we go to the next section, we can record what did we find. And ideally, and in the future, we plan to only show the ones that are related to each individual area. But at the moment, we're showing all because the user might be interested to input. So not only that, we're also allowing to enter, when do I want to recheck this cow? When do I want to put any comments? Do I want to enter any details? And as you might notice, there is a mobility score area in the area, and you might notice that it's not 0 to 3. The thing is, and we have some attendees that are from the other European fellow countries, and VetIMPRESS is on other countries, and this is just to show that we also cater for those countries. They use more of a system of 1 to 5, not necessarily the same way as in UK, but it's just to show that we're a live company and we're always adapting and changing. So it is not by any means that this is the way you need to do. If you think there's a better way, we can improve, we can get better, and we will become strong. So the digital dermatitis, like Nick has said before, we went to great extent to really help the user have a nice journey while recording the digital dermatitis. As you can see there, very easy to select if you're only looking at back feet, front feet, all feet, left, right, front, left hind, right hind, and select the score. And all this data is very important to record. And we have, after spending all this time registering your own little data and spending this visit on the farm, VetIMPRESS goes a little bit further, and it records, it shows that data at the end of the visit offline in a very simple way, intuitive way, and to give a little bit of feedback straight to the farmer. So how do we do this? We just plot on simple graphs the data that has been entered, and we create a list of the animals that were entered. Obviously we prioritize the ones that had scores high, and we also relate to the previous scores. So the system, the tablet has the information of the previous scores, and this can populate it with the other ones. On the foot trimming, we enter a little bit, again, a simple report of the data that we have, easy to identify the issues, to see if we have a high increase of white line, sole ulcer, and we have an easy to read individual animal data, really, that shows a little bit the data. So, and the digital dermatitis, we also have a quite intuitive visit report. So immediately, as soon as you finish the visit, you have something that you can share, have a conversation with a farmer, and take an early action. Also, if this is being done by the foot trimmer as a routine and the farmer is not there, it can be exported, it can be shared with the vet, with the farmer, and populated to their emails. It can be printed into a paper, but with a simple click of a button, it can be printed into it can be sent into the email. So yeah, so this is what I was just talking. And also, when it gets printed out, we also make an action list, as you can see here on the bottom. We tell you exactly what was entered on the visit and what actions need to happen. So if a bandage needs to come off, then the cow will be there. So again, something quite intuitive, passes straight to the farmer. The job is therefore handed over. When we come to the web, this is where maybe more data analysis comes into it. And we're going to start by an area that was already existent in VetIMPRESS for a long time. That is the data lists and the routine animal selector. The data list is basically, as it says, we pick up the data that is entered and we put it on animal lists. We have the mobility, where you can see it's populated by scores, but we also do that technique was saying, we populate if they're chronic, new, lame, recovered, and all those parameters. So we make that job simple. Lameness data, so we populate all the lameness data associated with other simple data. In that case, you can see it has the Yonis data there, and some animal comments. And whenever we can choose these to click, we click on the animal and we can actually see the animal history and when each individual event was recorded. And this is the other area, the routine lameness animal selector. So we don't only grab this data, we use this data to create that difficult list that Nick was referring to whenever you go to the farm, which cows do I want to see? So we went we created the data with the data that we have. Obviously, it depends how well it's being recorded. But if everything is going well, we can select which animals do we want to see, which animals we want to include. Once the list is created, it actually can be trimmed as well, and trimmed to if there's too many numbers of cows there, we can select to see a small number of cows this time, and maybe arrange for another visit next week to see the remainder of the cows. And yeah, so it's trying to make that job a little bit simple, and you can edit the criteria. This will be saved by farm. So each farm would have their own criteria. If you jumped into a different farm, it would update to the new farm. So we come into the newest area of web, and if you've been in our previous webinars, you've seen the report center area. So on the report center, we try to pick up the data and put it in a nice and visual way to look at it. So vets that are very busy don't have to necessarily go through the list. Vets that maybe are not as keen in data as Nick can very quickly get a report done and schedule it and get it onto the farm. So we call it the herd level analysis. And the reason for that is because we populate the data and we show it as a herd. So in here we have the mobility scores 0 and 1. we can look at it as the scores 2 and 3, and we can actually look at the Hertz dynamic, okay? So, and we can look at each one individually and see how that trend is going. I chose the picture here to show all. Not only that, if you click on each of the areas, it will only show the animals of each area. So if you click on the new lane, it would only show the animals that came new lane. And this can be exported and printed. And the same thing goes with the repeat lane, go with the recovered lane. So it's quite a little bit more informative and nice to look type of graph. We jump into the area of the diagnosis, and as we can see here, the diagnoses are populated by the entry on the system, and we really show, you can look at it for the 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, and see how that is changing. So is the digital dermatitis increasing? Is it staying the same? Is it becoming more sole ulcer? Really, really important. And finally, to relate to that, we have the treatment data. So we also want to know, okay, they detect a lot of interdigital dermatitis. What is the most common treatment? And to see if they align, to see if, as a vet, I believe that they're doing the correct thing. Conclusions: lameness impacts the welfare and economic return. So team working is vital for this lameness control. And I think a vet really needs to work with the whole team. Otherwise, the data communication is not going to be the best, and we might be seen as trying to step on each other's toes, and that's not good. So I think team working is very vital. Data recording is key. Obviously, it's the start of any data analysis. If we don't have data, it's very hard to know where we are, where we're going to, how can we improve, if we need to improve. And this is the key to me. Quality of the data. So in situations, there are situations where some data is being recorded here, some data is being recorded there. This is really hard for us, because then the quality of the data is never going to be the top, because I think the data all needs to be in one place so you can make the best decisions. And that leads me, farm management should always be backed by data, not by intuition, not by I think, or my neighbor did that. We should really move into a way that we backed it by data, because that's the strongest element that we have. It was a very big area to cover in such a small time. I would love to go deeper into the areas that we have, but I hope this explained a little bit of what we can do with the lameness. If you're interested, don't hesitate to get in contact with us. There's some 3 contacts there that you can get very easily reach us. Thank you very much for today, and thank you, Nick, for such a great introduction of the presentation.
Thank you, Gualter, and thank you, Nick, as well. So we have a couple of minutes. We've had a couple of questions come through. So Nick, I will go to you first. One of the questions that came through, it says, when analysing data, how do you differentiate between routine and lame cow inspections when using foot trimmer data? Do you ask the farmer or cross-check with mobility scores, or do you have another system?
Oh, fantastic question. I had a sneaky peek and I saw that was from Sarah, so thank you, Sarah, for that one. Oh yeah, the nightmare is where you've just got a collecting yard full of cows and you've just got no idea what you've got, and you haven't got your tablet, so you can't look at, you know, mobility score history, you can't look at days in milk, you can't see if the cow's pregnant, and you've just no idea if it's a routine trim or a lame cow trim. So there's 2 parts to this question. There's the capture as a trimmer, because the trimmer can differentiate between whether it's a lame cow trim or a a routine trim, and ideally all trimmers should be differentiating in their records between the two, so that when you look back through the trim records, you've got an easy way of doing that. And then for the likes of us, vets, as people analysing the data, you're then reliant on whoever's putting the data into the management system, that they are then correctly allocating the cow to a lame event or a routine treatment event. And that can vary from farm to farm how that happens. I've got one farm where they've just found it's much easier to have a trim session where it is pre-dries or early lactation routine checks, and so they know all the data that's come in from that trimmer at that session is all to do with the routine checks. But of course, lame cow checks need to happen all the time, every day, and so, you know, the temptation is always just to throw in the odd lame cow, which might get thrown into the routine foot trim list. But by and large, that can work quite well on some farms. So yeah, I'm sure that's not a simple answer, but it's sort of to reflect there's lots of different ways in which you can build into your data capture systems, ways of differentiating. But ultimately, there is a long-winded way of going through and checking your data, and that involves cross-checking with mobility scores back to trim scores. So having the mobility scores and trim results side by side is the ideal for doing that, so you can make an assessment as to whether actually these cows are being pulled up as routines or as lame cow checks.
Okay. Well, I will just complement that, because obviously it is I have to pull the attention to, there are systems that are doing their job nicely, and it's a matter of our system allows you to enter if you're seeing a lame cow or if this is just a routine check, and very easily you can input that data. So yeah, I think we can look at the future with a little bit of positivity, thinking it will be possible, not just our system, but I think it is a little bit maybe trying to use more software capturing data, a little bit more automation on the data, and maybe this data will be there for us to inform. Thank you.
Thank you, Gualter. And then just one more question for Nick. Just wondering how you inspire that initial change on farm. How do you get farms to start picking feet up from a mobility score rather than just routine trim everything and ignore the mildly lame animals?
Yeah. So that's a really good question, because that is fundamental to all of this, isn't it? That motivation, and I think positivity and enthusiasm and encouragement goes a long way with farmers, and that's always my starting point, through respect and understanding of their challenges and their problems, but a passion to deal with these problems at an earlier stage. And usually I'm dealing with the really highly engaged, highly motivated type of farmer. So I know, you know, I'm probably slightly privileged in that respect, that once I get a phone call from a farmer, I know that they are really keen to be improving, and often they are a top performing herd looking to improve even more. So those are the sorts of farmers that are really trying to understand how can we get to cows before they are showing the lesions causing lameness, and that for me is the key to it. I just hope that in 10 years time we won't be picking up cows' feet and seeing sole ulcers, because that for me is, I think I said it in my talk, that's a system failure if we've allowed the cow to progress to a sole ulcer. I'm not saying we'll eradicate sole ulcers from all dairy cows in 10 years time, but my word, wouldn't it be nice if we were at a stage where our picking up of cows' feet is at the bruised stage, and we've got a treatment that means that they don't progress on to having a sole ulcer. That's my dream, that's my goal.
Brilliant, thank you. And then just one question for Gualter. It talks about, on the diagnosis chart, can you differentiate between new and repeat cases?
Hi, Sarah. Thank you very much for that question. Yeah, it's a very, very good question. And at the moment, you can't. We're on the process of only including the new cases because as we got in conversations with Nick, obviously, and very helpful, he detected that little bit of a glitch, and we're happy to change that. And I think he will give a much better information of what is really happening on the farm. So we are going to allow to change that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, brilliant. So I think we've answered all the questions. And as we have run over time, I think it's probably the best time now to say thank you very much to Nick. I really appreciate your time, and it was a great presentation. And Gualter as well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay,
thank you
so
Gualter.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye-bye.